Welcome back, everybody. Buzz City Breakdown. I'm Owen. That's Albert. We write for the Charlotte Hornets on that website. You can find us here on YouTube every Tuesday through Thursday and on Sunday and Saturday here in the summers. We're probably going to go back to 6 days a week when the season starts, but we'll get there when we get there. Otherwise, we have a full schedule breakdown today. I know on yesterday's episode it said at the end that we were going to be talking to Dennis Schroeder today. I'm off tomorrow. Have to get something written for the local newspaper about one of the local high school football teams. So Albert is either going to be solo tomorrow or with one of the other Hornets on SI guys. We're not sure who yet, so we may figure that out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we have all 82 games. We have 6 slides with 12 games and then one with 10. Or is it 8? It's 8, Albert,
8.
right?
It is 8.
It's 8 on the last slide because there's 2 NBA Cup knockout games that if the Hornets don't make it to the knockouts, 2 other teams that didn't make it to the knockouts will get, auto-filled into the Hornets schedule, and if the Hornets make the knockouts, those games will be there. Last 2 regular season games, so we're going to give record predictions in full at the end of the episode, okay? But our records are going to be 80-game records, all right? So if you're a little bit confused and this, that, and the third, that's why, because we're predicting 80 games today. I don't want to just toss in a 1-1. We just don't know what's going to happen at the NBA Cup. So record predictions will be for 80 today. With that said, I'm super excited to get into it. We got good graphics. We got a new background. Something me and Albert came up with and wanted to give a little go on the episode today. So let us know what you guys think about that. Something I'm super proud of. We continue to get better with the graphics every single episode, truly. So with that said, before we get into the breakdown, Albert, my friend, how are you doing, buddy?
Doing fantastic. I feel a surge of energy as you introduce the show in such a maniacal fashion almost. Really happy with the new graphics. As you said, we're going to do the schedule breakdown today and then Dennis Schroeder deep dive tomorrow. I am probably going to be joined by someone. Let's see who, but by someone I'm pretty confident.
It'll be a surprise. That's the fun in it, right?
Exactly.
At the very least, you will have Albert, bar none, tomorrow to talk Dennis Schroeder. I should also say that you can find us on Spotify by looking up Buzz City Breakdown there. You can also find us in the YouTube playlist or YouTube podcast section of the playlist part of our YouTube channel. Where you can, if you have YouTube Premium, you can go to the playlist section of our channel, go to the podcast section. All the episodes are uploaded there as well for all your audio-only listening needs, and then you can leave a voicemail anytime at 704-750-9063 at the Buzz City Breakdown line to get your thoughts on the show, and Albert and I will respond to them in real time. With all the house cleaning out the way, let's jump into the first 12 games. Albert, if you're so inclined and so ready to. So the first 12 games we got here on the schedule, and what we're going to do here, at least what I plan on doing, what me and Albert talked about beforehand, is for each of these slides, we're going to give you our record prediction for these games on each slide that you're seeing behind us. Okay, and then at the end, both of us have a tally for what we have based on all these sections for the total record prediction that we'll give to you guys. I also have a little surprise at the end. I have 2 records to give you. One that's, my at-a-glance, and then I do have a best-case scenario that I predicted as well going down. So you'll get that at the end as well. So let's jump into the first 12 games. Brooklyn on the road to start the season. Atlanta, Miami, Washington at home. Detroit, Washington on the road. Philly at home, Detroit at home, Brooklyn on the road, Boston at home, Cleveland at home, Phoenix on the road. Relatively easy start to the season. I think there is a world where they can start 5-1 with relative ease, minus that Miami game. That would mean, winning both times versus the Wizards early in the season, but I love those Wizards matchups early in the season. They're still going to be figuring it out. I think continuity alone probably gets the Hornets to 5-1 likely. Atlanta's going to be a bit of a toss-up early in the season, but we've seen Charlotte beat them early in the season before. It gets kind of rough in the second 6 games, so right here, my at-a-glance prediction for these first 12 is 7-5. Start strong, but I think they do stumble once they have to play Philadelphia and Detroit, and the emotions start flaring up. Then you got Boston, Cleveland, and then you got to go on the road to Phoenix at the end of these first 12 games. What do you think, Albert?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment in my opinion. The way I went about this is I looked at every game and I assigned each game one of 3 categories. One would be a game where I'm very positive that the Hornets are going to win. One would be
I like this.
where I'm pretty positive that the Hornets are going to lose. And then one where I'm uncertain. And so that's a 50-50 game. And at the end, when I had all of the 50-50 games, I just split that number in half and gave half to the win side, half to the loss side.
Interesting.
So I've got 4 wins here in this stretch. which I would say I'm pretty confident in. That is Brooklyn to open the season. That is Atlanta in the second game of the season. I believe it's a home game. Atlanta is still figuring some stuff out, I think, especially after,
First home game.
retooling a little bit this summer. So are the Hornets, of course, but the home game boost, and there is, I think, a general sense of excitement a bit around this team still. I feel like that's going to be enough to get past an Atlanta team that's good, but not all that great. The third win for me would be Washington on the 26th. I think Washington is just not that good. We've talked about it multiple times on this podcast. They are very capable offensively, but defensively, I think they are in for a lot of trouble, and it's another home game, so would be surprising for me if the Hornets would find a way to lose here. It seems like one that they really should have. And then my fourth win comes against Brooklyn again on November 4th. So those are my 4 wins, and I have one certified loss, if you want to call it that, in this span, and that's the game against Philadelphia, which I believe is just the talent level, assuming that Philadelphia is healthy fully. The talent level is just too good, too high for the Hornets to compete in that sense. It is an NBA game, and so there's never a 100% chance that this team is going to win. The Hornets can beat the Sixers. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's impossible that they win this game, but I am fairly certain they will lose this game.
Yeah, I mean, especially for the Sixers, like for them to be an older team, it'll be early in the season. They'll still be very jovial and have their legs underneath them. And that team alone, when fully healthy, is scary, especially when they're not in the midst of the season. So I agree with you on the certified loss there. Boston early in the year with the Tatum out to prove a point scares me a little bit on the 6th. Cleveland, I think, is a bit of a toss-up because we don't even really know what's happening with Harden yet. We're all assuming he's going back, but he's not officially back. Or is he going back? None of us know. Detroit twice early in the season is super interesting to me as well. With the flare-ups there, the emotions are going to be prevalent, even if Jalen Duren's not there, I think, even without Beef Stew there, and he's in Memphis. So I think that this first stretch, there's a lot of different ways these first 12 games could go. Do they beat Washington 2 times in 3 games? Can they split with Detroit? You know what I mean? How do they look against Philadelphia? Miami, and your second home game, the Heat are still early figuring it out. Can you nab one of the early games against the Heat when, again, talk about emotions, the play-in rematch, Kobe will probably play pretty well in that game, I'd imagine. There's worlds where my best case reflects this, first 12 games going really, really well. But I think if the Hornets are going to have like a really, Charles Lee Coach of the Year candidate type season, it starts in those first 12 games and getting off to a really, really rapid fire start. Any other thoughts on the first 12?
Not really. Just to clarify, all of the games that I didn't mention so far are the ones where I think that they have a 50-50 shot, basically, where I'm of the opinion that this could go either way, more or less. Some of them I'd go 40-60 against the Hornets, some of them 60-40 for the Hornets, but I feel like everything else here is kind of in the balance, but they do need the wins against Brooklyn. They do probably need one against Detroit, I would really say so. I gave both of those a 50-50, but I would really want for them to win one against a team that's going to play with a lot of physicality and challenge them early on.
Sure.
And then Washington would, again, for me, be another one that I think they have to win, simply because Washington is defensively overmatched just by personnel.
I want to talk about, I mentioned 4 games against, I'm pretty sure it's 5 games against your division opponent, unless you tie on. I forget whether you play 4 games against your division teams or you play 5. I always get that mixed up. But the reason I even bring that up is because here early in the season, I mentioned in the first half, we're going to the second 12 games now, but they played Brooklyn twice in those first 12 games. They played Washington twice in those first 12 games, and they played Detroit twice in those first 12 games. In this second stretch of 12 games, from the 15th to the 18th, November 15th to the December 18th, they play the Wizards twice again. So they play the Wizards 4 times, very early in the first few months of the season. I think they have to go 4-0. Like those are to me. You want to talk about close to 50-50 games, but you want to lean towards picking the Hornets and everyone. You'd like to think they go out and beat the Wizards 4 times in the span of just a couple months. You play the Clippers twice in the second 12 games. You play Brooklyn again for the third time. But you also have Memphis. You have Chicago on a back-to-back. That should be a nice little 2-game win streak with Brooklyn on the back half. Like, there's a section here where they could win 4 games in a row relatively easily. I have them going 6-6, though, in this second stretch at my at a glance, because there are a lot of toss-up games. And there's, again, playing teams multiple times in a short time span is usually to the detriment of both teams, because both of the teams know what the other's going to do, and it truly comes down to execution. And the continuity for the Hornets makes me want to think that they're going to win those games more often than not, but it's hard to pick them in those 50-50 games every time, which is why I like the way you're doing this record prediction. So I'm at 6-6 for this second 12, with, I think, guaranteed wins against Memphis, Chicago, Brooklyn, at least one against Washington, but I have both, and then split with the Clippers for 6-6.
That's pretty reasonable. I think they can get 7 out of this. I would hope so, at least. Again, you mentioned Memphis, Chicago, Brooklyn. Those should all be wins. You mentioned Washington. They should win at least one of those, if not both, ideally. I do believe they should beat the Clippers at home. The Clippers are going to be one of those teams that isn't going to do a whole lot when it comes to, fighting for the playoffs, probably. But they do have Darius Garland, they do have Benedict Mathurin, they do have Brandon Ingram if the trade goes through, which I'm going to assume in this case. So they can certainly score, and they have guys who can get hot and challenge you in one regular season game. It can happen. Nevertheless, it is a home game against a team that doesn't have a lot of depth, that is pretty old still. They just re-signed Bradley Beal a couple of days ago. They still have Brook Lopez as their starting center, probably, unless they...
Supposed to have Brandon Ingram.
Exactly. So it's a pretty old team that you should be able to get running and get their legs a little tired, and that should help in that sense. The only real surefire losses I see here are Toronto and OKC. Again, assuming Toronto gets Kawhi Leonard, I think they are an incredibly dangerous team, especially defensively. I mean, a lineup of, let's say, Jamal Shedd, Kawhi Leonard, Jacoby Walter, Scotty Barnes, and Colin Murray Boyles is just devious.
Yeah,
and so I am,
to say the least.
I have a lot of respect for them in that sense. And OKC doesn't need much explaining. They are still one of, if not the best team in the league. They have arguably the best player in the league. Let's see how that dynamic changes, if it's going to be Wembanyama early on next season, if Shea maybe can reclaim that throne a little bit, or at least give people more so of a reason to defend him. I think he's still very much in the conversation. It's just more of an open conversation right now. But they, especially the big men for OKC, should give the Hornets issues. I think they're going to run into some trouble there.
Well, I mean, yeah, OKC and Toronto were givens for me, too. The Clippers scare me just, again, early in the season. You're playing them twice in the span of just a couple weeks. The Wizards, it scares me to say that they'll win both again here, because I assumed in the first 12 that they won both, and it's like, you play a team that many times. Same goes for the Wizards. You play the Hornets that many times in a short span of time. Like, you're going to be pretty frustrated if you don't win at least one of those games. So I have them splitting here with the Wizards, starting the season 3-1 against them. Lakers on the road, isn't fun. But I should add that this part of the schedule, not all of it, but I believe Boston is the last game before the NBA Cup knockout break.
Yes.
So there could potentially be 2 games in the middle of that. But Boston backwards, all the way back to Brooklyn in the first 12 games, was Albert and I's easiest stretch of the schedule. So I'm with Albert. There is a world where this is one of the 12-game stretches where they have the most potential. I think if they, beat LA and then go right down the road, staying in the same town, and beat the Lakers right after, come back home, beat Atlanta, which is, I have a loss in this 12 for Atlanta as well, because I picked them against Atlanta in the first 12.
I think, honestly, they only need one of those LA games that would be enough in my opinion, especially if they can get a win in Phoenix. But it's not reasonable to expect them to beat the Clippers and the Lakers. Probably there's just too much offensive talent on both of those teams.
Yeah.
But it is reasonable to expect them to beat one of those teams again, because they both have very clear weaknesses that you can exploit, and the Hornets have the personnel offensively to exploit defensive weaknesses of all kinds.
I should say before we move on to the next 12. My record prediction here at a glance. Again, I have a best case scenario at the end of the episode, so for what that's worth, like give me a bit of slack. I didn't want to go super negative, but I wanted to have one, similar in my calculus, but that's a little different than Albert's. Like I was going down the schedule. Oh well, I gave them 2 wins against this team the last 2 times I saw them. Like that was me going through this. So I have them at 6-6 in this part of the schedule as well. I think there's a world if they beat Phoenix and start that West Coast road trip hot going into these 12 games. You could beat LAC. Again, you're staying in LA, just driving down the road to play, at the Staples Center the next night. I'm not calling it Crypto.com Arena other than to make fun of it. And then Atlanta, if they were to win 2 out of 3 of those West games, I would expect them to lose to Atlanta coming back. But then Memphis, Chicago, Brooklyn, Washington, Boston, Washington is a stretch of 6 games where you would really like to see them go 5-1, 4-2, like at worst, because you split with Washington and lose to Boston. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I would have interjected right there and said exactly what you just said. So, in complete agreement.
Let's go on to the next 12. November 19th through January 9th. Pushing past the new year. All right, we got Portland on December 19th, 76ers on the December 21st, Magic on the 23rd, Hawks on the 26th, Heat on the 27th, Magic on the 29th, Spurs on the 31st, Cavs on the 2nd, Bucks on the 3rd, Hawks on the 5th, Nuggets on the 7th, Blazers again on the 9th. For our audio listeners, for those of you who wonder why I'm naming them off when there's a graphic. The games here are tough, and on top of that, it's bang, 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 bang. Like, you're in the thick of the schedule when it gets to these, 12 games right here.
And it's also the first dull phase of the season, right? You, in October and even then in November with the NBA Cup especially, you still have that sense of excitement. Even in early December, again, the NBA Cup, you are playing for something immediately. You still have that feel of, okay, we have a new group, we can create something new, this is fresh, this is exciting. And then you hit that late December stretch, and that's usually where teams get really tested when it comes to how together are you really, how much do you really want to figure this out, or once that wave of excitement has gone by, are you just going to kind of let that extinguish your flame and let the season peter out?
This is when the Hornets last year started to really catch fire, because they got healthy, they were young, had their legs under them, finally got into the swing of the season with the rookies. But this is also the same point of the season, like I alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, with these 12 games, this next set of 12 after the first 24, where older teams start to get a little weary. You're looking at the All-Star break, and it's not quite close because it's at the end of February, but you're in January, so you're thinking about it. You know what I mean? But even after this 12, in the next 12, again, it's bang, 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 bang. And if the Hornets are hovering around 500 and really struggle in this section too, and kind of go lackadaisical into middle January, going into February, it could really be bad for them. But here in this stretch, I think Portland should be a win for them, but I have them splitting here because you never know what's going to happen. I don't know what they're going to look like. Drew Holiday could be a problem for Kobe White. I do have them starting the stretch 0-2, that first loss being to Portland, and then the second loss being to Philadelphia. Don't have them winning with the Magic either, but then I do have them going on a win against the Hawks, loss to the Heat, win against the Magic, loss to the Spurs, loss to the Cavs, but then win against the Bucks, win against the Hawks, loss to the Nuggets, win against the Blazers here. So, again, at where right here for December 19th, January, 6-6, like I said. So, what do you have here, Albert?
I don't have a surefire win here. First of all, I think none of these games are must wins. You have fought pretty surefire losses in my opinion. That's the Philadelphia game again early on. I think they're going to lose in Orlando. That's going to be a tough one. Right around Christmas, you're playing away from home. You feel kind of maybe, it's close to Christmas. You want to be at home and not in Orlando and playing a team that's going to beat you up pretty much every chance they get. And I have San Antonio as a loss, pretty self-explanatory. And then the Miami game, which is on December 27th, which is one day after the Atlanta game. You're playing in Miami. It's about as tough as it gets in the regular season. Second night of a back-to-back against a team led by Giannis Antetokounmpo is not fun ever. Every other game for me is a 50-50. I think, not exactly 50-50, but again, a 60-40, a 40-60 in that sense. I think they can definitely beat Portland once, possibly even twice. They can beat Atlanta once, possibly twice. Denver, you would think, is much better than them, but I am very concerned with Denver's depth. I am concerned with how they allowed themselves to be eliminated from the playoffs this year. I thought it was pretty... I'm going to be careful not to use too harsh of a word here, but I thought it was pretty sad how they went out against the Timberwolves team that was without 3 starters or 2 starters and like other rotational players. So they aren't going to be that good, I imagine. They are going to, not take the regular season all too serious because they want to also rest their guys for the playoffs. We've seen Aaron Gordon have injury issues. We've seen Jamal Murray have injury issues. Nikola Jokic isn't getting any younger. So I think that's a winnable game. And I think the second Orlando game, they could also win. I think Orlando is a bad matchup, but it is at home. It is a couple of days before New Year's, but you don't have to play back-to-back. If you want to beat Orlando, that's probably like a situation where you can do it. And especially if you lose the game a couple of days before that, and you now get the chance to immediately kind of get your revenge just 5 days later, and now you're at home, now you've spent Christmas with your family, now there's a bit of excitement in the arena maybe, and that changes things, I think.
And now, I think I listed off 5 wins a second ago when I was talking about that. I have them beating the Magic twice, beating the Hawks twice, and then beating the Bucks and splitting with the Blazers. I think their best case scenario here is the teams that they play multiple times in this 12-game span. Again, like, that's a lot of the keys on this schedule are you going to be able to beat teams twice in a short span of time, or are you going to get lost in the, are you prepared enough of a team to be the team who takes advantage of playing against somebody in a recent matchup as compared to like the Hornets last year, in my opinion, playing teams for the second time. You mentioned a Boston game against Tatum when he was coming back the other day. He hadn't even played against the Hornets, but the Hornets had played them closer early in the year, but they were the younger team later in the season. And Boston was then the experienced team that, was capable of taking advantage of what they knew about the Hornets. And with the playoff experience they have, they're going to have to be able to be the team who is on the offensive in those games. Because here, if you split with Atlanta, Orlando, and Portland, maybe you beat Milwaukee, then you're only looking at 3 wins out of this 12. 4? Yeah. So if you split with everybody, that'd be 1 against Orlando, 1 against Portland, 1 against Atlanta, and then I have them beating the Bucks. So like, you're going to have to beat one of those teams, preferably 2 out of the 3 teams twice in the.
I think
that's.
You think they can do that? You think they beat Orlando twice? You think they beat Atlanta twice? One of those games being in Atlanta, I just think it's
a tough ask, but they can't. I don't know. At this point, they cannot afford to split with more than one of the teams in this spot. So I have them at 6-6 in this spot, but like, it could get ugly fast here as we, especially with San Antonio at home on, right after Christmas. Like, you're in the slug of Christmas and this, that, and the third. I don't know. This portion of the schedule is certainly one of the more scary ones to me.
I think they probably get 3 or 4 here. Wins, that's,
I mean, if we're talking about losing yeah, one of the two matchups on these split, then that makes sense. Like that's where they're going to end up if they lose one of the ones to Atlanta and one of the ones to Orlando.
Exactly.
They're going to be looking that in the barrel of the looking down the barrel of the gun. Goodness, can't find my words today. Let's go to the next 12. January 12th through February 2nd. All right, they start with Sacramento on the 10th, Golden State on the 13th, January 13th, Utah on the 14th, so back-to-back there with Golden State, Utah, Denver on the road as well on the 16th, Dallas on the 19th. So that's the end of a 6-game. That is their biggest, if I'm not mistaken, road trip of the entire year. This 6-game stretch right here from Portland on the 9th on the last slide all the way to Dallas on January 19th. That's going to be a massive stretch for them. There's a bunch of winnable games in there compared to normal on these. Normally the Lakers and the Clippers are in that long stretch, but you have them in a separate stretch earlier in the season. I think that's to the Hornets' benefit. Gonna have to kill this West Coast road trip section. But this is the section of the schedule that I have them doing the worst in. Albert.
Wow.
I have them
really.
Yeah, I have them at 4-8 in this part of the schedule. I do. I think they get some wins early, but Houston, Boston, Orlando, after I had them beating Orlando the last 2 times, mind you, right? So Houston, Boston, Orlando, after you just played them twice recently, San Antonio, Minnesota, LA in a weird home game after 2 on the road, like then Miami. The only wins I see here, Sacramento, Dallas, Utah, and then you gotta hope that you beat one of the 3 of Golden State, Houston, or LA. I think that's where I'm at because I have them losing to Orlando in this stretch. This one's going to be tough, and it's going to really test their mettle.
I think this is more going to be like 5 or 6 wins, at least I would imagine. Sacramento obviously that's by far the easiest game. It's a must-win. If they don't win that one, then they might as well... Okay, I don't want to say they might as well stop showing up, but you have to win the Sacramento game at the beginning here. And then out of the Golden State, Utah, Denver, and Dallas games, those 4, I think you can very much definitely win 2, possibly even 3. Those are all, again, good teams that are going to be in the playoff hunt. Denver is probably going to be not in the playoff hunt, but I think, again, a top 5 team at the very least.
Denver's the bad matchup for Charlotte. That's what scares me. They beat them last year, though.
You say that, and last year they really beat the brakes off them. They were that was in the middle of that hot stretch they had, but nevertheless they really beat them. So I think they can beat Denver. They can beat Utah. Utah is going to look interesting next season with Jaren Jackson Jr., with Lauri Markkanen, no more Walker Kessler, but they do have Keontae George. They have a lot of offensive firepower. That could be a really interesting matchup, I think, especially for the front courts for the Hornets. Golden State, aging at this point in the season, maybe not that healthy, maybe not even in the playoff race anymore. If we're being completely honest, they could just falter up until this point. Denver, again, I said that they are beatable. And then Dallas, if Dallas scares you as a Hornet, then you are doing something wrong.
No, I'm with you, but again, like I have them at 4-8, and that's to me that's Sacramento, Utah, Dallas. Probably Golden State. But then what scares me with this stretch, Albert, is the fact that after Dallas, after the
the latter half is tough for sure.
Because if they lose to Houston, it could snowball fast. You know what I mean? Like if they lose to Houston and then leave home after they have a 6-game road stretch and then go home and then have a back-to-back from Houston on the 22nd to Boston on the road.
I've heard
NBA guys talk about how difficult those home and then road back-to-backs are. So like that terrifies me. After a 6-game road trip, you're barely back in Charlotte, but for a few days. But they have a few days rest before that Rockets game, so that one's very possible. But if they lose at home against Houston on the first half of that back-to-back, I could very easily see it lost to Houston, lost to Boston, close loss to Orlando, lost to San Antonio, lost to Minnesota, close loss to LA, close loss to Miami. Like, this could be a stretch that really kicks them in the butt if they're not careful. Truly, maybe more than any of the others, especially with it being front loaded with the teams that they should be beating here. that stretch of San Antonio, Minnesota, Miami with the Lakers sandwiched in between worries me. Really does worry me. You have any other thoughts here on
Yeah,
the stretch?
my 5 wins would come from one of the Sacramento game to begin with, and then two of the Golden State, Utah, Denver, Dallas stretch, and then I think they're gonna win one of the back-to-back games, the Houston Boston back-to-back. I think they're gonna win one of those, and then I think they're also gonna either beat Orlando at home or the Lakers at home. I think again those are a lot of games that are maybe the Orlando matchup is not very favorable for them, but the Lakers matchup should be more so. Lakers a team that is again very offensive minded, that is gonna really rely on Walker Kessler a lot defensively. I think they have the firepower to just continuously churn out high scoring games, and that will be enough to win games, even though you maybe have a schedule or stretch of the schedule where you face a
Right.
good opponent on back-to-back nights.
And I think it's also important to note that like we're at the beginning of January right now. This is all-star push season right
Sure.
here. You know, I'm talking about them going 4-8, and if they go 4-8 in this stretch, I don't know that it looks too good for Brandon Miller's all-star case by this point in the season. But best case scenario for this stretch of the season is that Brandon Miller's on fire. He's been healthy. He's finally finding his groove as a guy that is only, I don't even know that he's old enough to be considered hitting his prime quite yet as a player. Like he's still got so much room to grow. And with the youth that he has, like the reason the Hornets were winning is because Brandon Miller was playing, just lights out
Yes.
on defense and on offense during that stretch in January. And if Brandon hits that same stride, could just completely prove me wrong, and they get another upset win against San Antonio, and beat LaMelo on the road in Minnesota. Like these are going to be tough asks. But if Brandon Miller is playing his best basketball, I said that the other day. That's what this whole season hinges on, and I'm just not no revolutionary saying, but
Yeah.
the variance of the way this season could go because of how much it hinges on Brandon Miller's development is just massive. It more so than it was last year certainly. So let's move into the next stretch. The stretch that is split up by All-Star break. Okay, so this is February 4th to March 3rd. All right, they have 2, 4, 6, 7 home games out of these 12. So this is a stretch where they play some tough games, but you play a lot more. You play more games at home than on the road. They start with Boston at home on the 4th, back to back. Have Golden State at home on the 5th. Both of those games are winnable. I really think so. A home back to back. The Hornets were great in back to back, especially second half of back to backs last year. After what I predicted to be a struggle in the last 12 because of back to backs, I think they start 2-0 here. Don't like the game against Toronto on the 7th. Go on the road again to play New York on the 9th, February 9th. Milwaukee at home on the 11th. Dallas at home on the 13th. Minnesota at home on the 15th on President's Day. Toronto at home on the 17th. Magic on the road on the 25th. Rockets on the road on the 26th. Another back-to-back. Kings at home on the 28th, and then the Sixers after the All-Star break. It looks like, if I'm not mistaken. No. Orlando is after the All-Star break, I believe. And then you have Philadelphia after a nice long rest on March 3rd. You got 5 days off in between Sacramento and Philadelphia. Albert, I want to go to you here first. Tell me about your thoughts on this stretch. Another one that is just like could go either way, man. Truly,
For sure. I think they're gonna win one of the first two games. Again, Boston, Golden State, both games at Spectrum Center, both teams that are not elite at this point, especially if you look at the depth of their rosters. Both teams that have superstars with, I don't want to say injury issues, but at the very least you can have concerns if Stephen Curry is going to suit up at that point, if Jimmy Butler is going to suit up at that point. And with Jason Tatum, he hasn't had injury issues at all so far during his career. It's really just the one ACL tear, and we're going to have to see if he can fully bounce back from that. But it's possible that he still, takes rest days during the season. It's a possibility. So I think they win one of those. I think there's almost no shot they beat either Toronto or New York in not at Spectrum Center away. Then you go home, you should beat Milwaukee, you should beat Dallas at home as well. I think Dallas is, again, not that good of a team. They have a ridiculous front court rotation. Genuinely, if you have some time and want to just scratch your head, you can go look up their front court rotation. It's bewildering. There is a lot of talent there. I'm not doubting that, but there is a log jam of players with similar strengths, and so Dallas beatable. You have Minnesota and Toronto at home before the All-Star break. I think they can win one of those again, similarly to the Boston Golden State stretch. I think this one, they have two teams that are similar in a way where they are really good. But I would hope that heading into All-Star break, you get to stay home for, depending on when they will get back from New York, for a couple of weeks, maybe 1.5 weeks, 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's going to be a big boost for them.
Yeah, you should really feel some security through that. So hopefully go win one of those. Directly after the All-Star break, to go to Orlando and Houston is going to be tough. You can maybe win Orlando. I don't think you can win Houston, especially on the second night of a back-to-back. If Houston is healthy at that point, then you have to beat Sacramento, because you always have to beat Sacramento this season if they come up on your schedule. And then you end with a game at Philadelphia, which I think might be winnable. And I say this because it's pretty late in the season. It's directly after the All-Star break. And it's very reasonable to assume that either Embiid and or LeBron and or Maxey and or Jaylen Brown, that one or two of those guys are going to be out. That is fair to assume, I think. It doesn't have to happen, but if that is the case, the Hornets do have the talent necessary to maybe get a upset win there. Maybe.
I think so too. Again, upset wins are going to be huge, just as they were last year for the Hornets to get to 44. They had 44 last season, if I'm not mistaken. 44 and 38. Like, it's because they beat San Antonio at home in a matinee game on national TV. Like, it's because they had moments like that. And to me, I have them at 5-7, but I would spoil one of my best case scenarios, because I have one for all of these. I could absolutely see this going to a 7-5 just as quickly, and I say that because I think I mentioned at the beginning, I think they beat Boston, I think they beat Golden State. Even on a back-to-back, it's at home. This is, to me, I've really hear me. Throughout the season so far to this point, I've really been against Charlotte in terms of how I'm picking against them in back-to-backs.
Sure.
I think this part of the schedule is where I'm really thinking their youth and continuity is going to help them win more of those back-to-backs than they have earlier in the season. So I like the home back-to-back win. All right. And then I love the Milwaukee-Dallas not a back-to-back, but winning the games back-to-back. And then to me, I had them at 5-7, but like I said, my 2 wins guaranteed at 5-7 after Boston, Golden State, Milwaukee, Dallas, and then they have the Kings. That would be my automatic 5th win. But I think the way they get to 7 is by also winning that back-to-back after the All-Star break against Orlando.
Yes, absolutely.
I hear you it being tough, but they won back-to-backs like that last year that are just completely unexpected on the road. It's a long trip, but I like the rest. I like them in the first one against Boston and Golden State. I do like them against Orlando and Houston. My pick is 5-7, but my best case scenario for this section really is 7-5. I think this is where their youth could start the show.
I think there's absolutely no way they beat Orlando and Houston directly after the All-Star break. That would be.
You want to put $5 on it?
Sure. If you wanna lose $5, you can do that. We already have a $5 bet going on if Zachary Reza-Shea is going to play considerable center minutes next season.
I gotta find a way to win my money back.
For the Dallas Mavericks, which you will lose that one, and I think you'll lose this one as well. So your part of the bet is you are claiming they will win both of those games?
Yes. It's not reflected in my record pick at 5-7, but it is in my best case scenario.
Okay.
I'm doing it
that's
to go for the bet.
Very gracious of you to just give me $5 like that. There's absolutely no way they win both of those. Houston and Orlando are both teams that will eat you up defensively, and the Hornets, they beat Orlando last year multiple times. They did beat Houston last year once, I think. But in all seriousness, you want to go to both of those cities that are not that close to each other and win 2 games back to back.
But you're also going to be in Orlando probably for 2 days before that game's first played.
I mean, that's fine, but that doesn't really
Not
matter.
a traditional back-to-back in that sense.
Sure,
in my mind.
okay, sure, but still, you play Orlando. They are gonna be scrappy. They are gonna challenge you, and if you win that one somehow, I think they can win the Orlando one. Maybe it's possible.
Maybe.
But even if they win that one, you're telling me they go into Houston the next day, another team that is scrappy defensively, not in the same sense as the Magic. They are older, that is true, and they have, guys like Albert Şengün and Fred VanVleet who you can attack defensively. But they have the Tari Easons of this world. They have the Jayshawn Tates of this world. They will get scrappy. Reed Shepard will get scrappy with you.
The fact that you didn't mention Kevin Durant is hilarious.
Kevin Durant, I don't think he's as much of a scrappy defender, I would say.
Well, that's fair. You were talking about defenders, but really, when I think of Houston, first thing, and that's the reason I like that pick is because after the All-Star break, KD is probably going to be in the All-Star game. I just think that team overall is just going to be sluggish coming out of the break. Like this,
I don't see it.
Probably one of the better chances they'll have outside of the Boston Golden State back-to-back at the beginning of these 12. These are going to be two of the better chances they have all year to win back-to-backs, both front and back half of them. Clearly we disagree, but let's move on. So let me get this clear, Albert. What is your, for this February 4th through March 3rd, what is your for sure you think they will win these amount of games? Because like I said, mine's 5 and 7 for this stretch.
So the for sure wins I have are Milwaukee, Dallas, and Sacramento, and then I have 5 50-50 games. So you could say either 2 or 3, but it's gonna come out at either 5 or 6 wins, I think. It's possible. And again, I think they can beat Orlando. I think they can beat Minnesota or Toronto. I think they can beat Boston or Golden State. To expect them to win in Orlando and in Houston is ridiculous, and I am happy to receive $10 at the end of the next NBA season. Thank you very much.
We'll see. I have it written down on a sticky note on my computer, so I'm not.
Yeah, that one will disappear mysteriously. I can already tell.
We'll see. Let's move into the second to last stretch of the schedule here that we have written down, March 6th to March 28th. Okay, playoff push season right here. And after All-Star break, it doesn't slow down one bit right here for the Hornets. They got the Bulls on March 6th on the road, Pacers on March 8th on the road, the Pelicans on the 10th at home, Pacers on the 11th at home, and a home back-to-back, Suns at home on the 13th, the Thunder on the road on the 16th, Pelicans on the road on the 18th, Pistons on the road on the 20th, Memphis on the road on the 22nd, Pistons at home on the 24th, Knicks at home on the 26th, Jazz at home on March 28th. Okay, so you got 3 home game stands, 2 3-game home game stands here, and you got a 4-game road trip that includes the Oklahoma City Thunder, but it also includes the New Orleans Pelicans and the Memphis Grizzlies. So this is, I think, a portion of the schedule. I have them at 7 and 5. In this portion of the schedule, I have them winning against Chicago on the 6th, winning against the Pacers on the 8th, winning against the Pelicans on the 10th, losing to the Pacers on the 11th, losing to the Suns on the 13th, losing to the Thunder on the 16th, beating the Pelicans on the 18th. Losing to the Pistons, beating the Grizzlies, beating the Pistons at home, losing to the Knicks, beating the Jazz on the 28th. So those are my seven wins here. I think, if they're going to have any chance of the play-in, they're going to have to do great here to really give themselves a shot.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with that. I also have them at 7 here. I have 4 must-win games. That is in Chicago, that is at home and in New Orleans. So in New Orleans and at home against New Orleans. And then also at Memphis. I think those 4 games are going to be against teams that will be out of the playoff race by then. And not to say they won't be trying, but we know how the NBA regular season works. And if you play those types of teams at that time of the year, you have to beat them if you want to be serious about making a playoff push. So those all have to be wins. They're probably not going to win in Indiana, I would assume. And they're most definitely not going to win in Oklahoma City. So those are my losses. And every other game, I think, is winnable. It's a lot of home games at home against Indiana. We have no clue what Indiana is going to look like. Tyrese Halliburton obviously has been out for over a year at this point. I saw a video recently where he said that he's healthy and is, gonna return to play pretty much immediately. So looking forward to what that will look like, but we can't really say with full certainty that they are going to be a finals team again or a contender for a deep playoff run. Phoenix is obviously beatable at home. Detroit away, I also have as a 50-50 game, which might seem weird, but I think Detroit is just not that good this year. Again, another thing we have discussed on this podcast before. I think no Jalen Duren. I'm not the biggest fan of the John Collins acquisition. I'm not the biggest fan of keeping around Kevin Huerter, who I think is not that good, in all honesty. So I feel like they could be a bit worse than people maybe expect, and the Hornets could snag that one. And then, again, you bring Detroit back home a couple of days later, 4 days later. You can definitely win that one. If you didn't win in Detroit, you should win at home against Detroit. And then you get New York and Utah at home, which, again, I think you win one of those two. And then you have the 4 surefire wins that I mentioned. You have 6 50-50 games, of which I will count 3 as wins. You get out with 7 wins. That would be totally fine.
I think here the important part and the reason I mentioned these, 2 separate 3-game homestands. Okay, so we talked about in the last set of 12 games that right before the All-Star break, they have a 4-game homestand, okay? That is their only other 3+ game homestand since December. Okay, at the end of the December, they have a homestand, but not until before the All-Star break do they get another 3 or more game homestand. So these will be this is their last 2 essential multi-game homestands of the season. And you'll see that here moving at the end of the schedule. So, like, to me, yes, there's a back-to-back, but you're talking about not beating the Pacers on the road. I think they got to split with Indiana here at the very least. They really, really need to win against a team that they shouldn't here if they're trying to truly push for, like, especially a home game in the play-in. Best case scenario here, I wrote 7-5 as my at a glance. My best case scenario here is 7-5, though. Yeah, I think this is going to be hard. You ready to go into the last bit of the schedule, Albert?
Yep.
All right, let's go to the last 8 games, March 30th through April 11th. All right, guys, we're here with a home game again on the 30th against the Heat. Road game, 4-game road stretch in the last 7 games of the season. You're on the road against the Knicks on the 1st, back-to-back on the road at Milwaukee on the 2nd, on the road at Cleveland on the 4th, on the road at Philly on the 11th, at home against Indiana again on the 6th, Chicago in a back-to-back on the road on the 7th, and then Brooklyn at home to finish out the season on April 9th after playing them in the very first game of the season, which I think is kind of fitting that they play on the road in Brooklyn in Game 1, get Brooklyn at home to end the season in Game 82. So I have them at 3-5 in this stretch, Albert, with wins against Milwaukee, Brooklyn, and Chicago. I don't think they can beat Indiana right here in playoff crunch time. Indiana's probably going to be fighting for seeding really, really bad. They're going to be in good shape. Halliburton is going to be really informed by that time. Best case scenario here for me is 4-4, but that's by beating Indiana. I think they're going to truly struggle, I think, against Miami, New York, and Cleveland, and Philadelphia, who are all going to be like gearing up for the playoffs in the first round. So I like 3-5, but 4-4 is not impossible. I just think 4-4 is the best they can do here to end the season.
Sure, I think they can win 4 definitely, maybe even 5. I'll just take it game by game. The Miami game, I think, is winnable. I've got it as a 50-50. It is late in the season. It is reasonable to expect that Miami, not that likely, but Miami could already be locked into a seed. Miami could very well have lost one of their starters, and even if it's just Andrew Wiggins, let's say, that's a massive blow to them.
That's true.
Would then have to rely solely pretty much on Giannis Antetokounmpo and Bam Adebayo, which I think even then they are not an easy team to beat, not at all, but they are a team that you can beat, and that's what it's all about in the end. New York,
you got Giannis, you got an NBA champion, and then the second best player of all time, and Bam. So it's going to be a tough game. Continue,
sure, please. Whatever. In New York, I think they lose because New York is probably going to still be fighting for playoff seeding, and even if they're not going to be fighting for playoff seeding, they will not want to lose at home to the Hornets a couple of weeks before the playoffs start. Would be very unlike them. I think the game in Milwaukee is actually another 50-50 to me.
I was going to bring that up. That's going to be a tough one coming out of New York. You know what I mean? And Milwaukee was one of my certified wins here. And it's going to be probably the toughest game against Milwaukee that they'll play all season, given where it's located. I totally agree.
Not only that, but I feel like Milwaukee could be a sneaky play-in candidate. I'm not saying I would bet any money on that, or, I'm not telling you to go tell your friends, oh my god, Milwaukee's going to make the play-ins.
No, but that's fair because they're going to be fighting with the Hornets most likely at this point at the bottom end of the play-in conversation. That's a fair point.
And they do have the talent to make the play-in. If you look at that roster, they don't have any superstars, but they do have a lot of guys who are either very young and talented or guys who have been around the league and are experienced enough to, be part of a team that makes a play-in push. So I think that one is tricky. I think they lose in Cleveland. Again, similar reasoning to the loss in New York. Then I think they have a chance against Indiana at home. You mentioned that Halliburton is going to be gearing up at that time. I think it's a home game, and especially because I expect them to lose 2 out of those 3 games on that road trip, I feel like they will come home and
rebound.
have to do something back to the wall. Indiana, this is really close to the end of the season, so Indiana really could be locked into some place already. I feel like this is a winnable one, theoretically, and then the last 3, I have them winning out. And
I think, go ahead.
Brooklyn and Chicago don't need much explanation, I think. And I think they beat Philadelphia because the chances that Philadelphia at the final day of the season is going to have anything to play for, those are pretty low. And I mentioned this with New York. They're not going to want to lose at home to the Hornets a couple of days or weeks before the playoffs. In this case, I just cannot see them trot out LeBron or Maxey or Embiid or anybody in that final game of the season. Maybe one of the big 4 and then VJ Edgecomb. And that still is a respectable lineup probably, but you would really have to beat that, yeah.
Yeah, and that's interesting you say that about Philadelphia. I like that caveat. I also like what you said about coming back home because of the tough road trip and beating Indiana. But the thing that's tricky about these last 8 games to me is 2 of the 3 games in these last 8 that I think, are guaranteed wins come on the second half of a back-to-back with Milwaukee on April 2nd after we're both saying they're going to lose in New York on April 1st. And then, Albert's saying they're going to beat Indiana on the 6th after a 4-game
I think they
trip,
could. I think they could. I've got that as a 50-50.
If they go anywhere close to 6 wins in this stretch, like they're probably making the play-in for certain, I'd say. But I have them at 3-5 in these last 8. So I think it's time to get into record predictions to tally it all up, Albert.
Sounds like a great idea.
I know all of you listening are like, gosh, I don't think, and to be fair, out of, like I said, there were 7 slides, 6 had 12 games, and then the last one had 8. Okay, and our record predictions will be 80-game predictions because we don't know what the 2 games, whether it's the Hornets make the knockouts or they get kicked out and play the teams, that also don't make it. So 80-game record predictions, all right? I will also say that there isn't a single 12-game out of the 6 12-game stretches we had slides for. Not a single one of those 12-game stretches in my at-a-glance predictions did I have the Hornets winning 8 games. The most I had multiple spots where they went 7-5, but not one did I have them 8-4. Okay, lots of ones under 500, and you guys are thinking, gosh, what the record must be bad at the end. It surprised me, the fact that I was like down on the record after I tallied it all up. But keep in mind, 2 games aren't here. Even with my very, what's the right word here?
Mellow,
yes, that's a great word. Very, cautious is another word. Record prediction. My cautious record prediction is 38-42. Okay, you could, take that to 40 and, 42 with the extra 2 games, or 38-44, whichever way you would split them. 38-42 is what I have them at a glance. All right. Now, my best case scenario, which also in the best case scenario, there's only one out of those 6 12-game stretches where I have them going 8-4, and it's the very first one. So if the Hornets are going to win 40 games, to me, I think it does start at the beginning of the season, because the first 3 months of the season are where the best parts of their schedule for them to get the most amount of wins really are. It gets tough towards the new year and All-Star break and afterwards. It really does. So my best case scenario record prediction has the Hornets at 44-36. With the extra 2 games, potentially being able to take them to 46 wins, or, take them to 38 losses and be at the same place they were last season, which I think if you end up with the same amount of wins as last season, you're looking at this season as an absolute win. You know what I mean?
Yes. I mean, 100%. And I will just put mine out here. I've gone to the flip side. I have them at 42 wins and 38 losses. I'm going to stand on business in that sense and not come out with a hypothetical best case, worst case, whatever. I'm standing on my 42 and 38. I feel like I would probably have gotten out at 41-39 or 40-40. But to me, I didn't take into account quite enough how many injuries there are going to be for other teams. And for the Hornets, sure, you can say Brand Miller is a bit injury prone. But apart from that, you don't really have anyone who you got to worry about. Hopefully, I'm probably jinxing it right now. But Knüppel, he had the back injury, but hasn't had, any other lingering problems throughout his career. The same for Naz Reid over the last couple of years, always been pretty available. Harness has been available over his young career. Musa has been available, so Kobe has been available. You look at this team, and I think their best hope is just staying together and staying healthy. And if that just happens to be the case, they can surprise people, and that's pretty much getting them halfway there, I think.
Well, and not just that. I think when you look at the standings at the end of the season and you look back and you're like, okay, this team's here. I didn't think they were going to be here. Why are they here? I don't want to say 9 times out of 10, but I definitely argue off the top of my head like 7 to 10 or 8 out of 10 of those times when you're looking at those specific kinds of teams at the end of the season. I would say most times you're like, oh, well, they were really healthy. You know what I mean? Like, sure. Even Atlanta, right? They had their massive run at the end of the season last year. Same with Charlotte before Atlanta. Like, the reason Atlanta had that run, they were very healthy. CJ McCollum had been healthy and was really hitting stride at that point in the season. And I think that really affects a lot of teams, and you're absolutely right. And it does seem like purposeful. Like you said, Naz Reid, very available. You trade LaMelo, who was notoriously not super available until this last season. Think about what you will. It does seem like they're trying to put available guys on the roster, plus they have playoff experience and, have lasted through regular seasons, through multiple playoff seasons. This roster now has multiple of those guys that are going to be rotation pieces on a consistent basis next year. So, again, I will say my at a glance, mellow, cautious record prediction was 38-42. If you want to split the 2 games we don't know they'll play yet because of the NBA Cup, you can say 39-43 and just call it a split there. Same with my best case scenario. At 44-36, you want to split those 2 games that we don't know about yet, 45-37. I mean, to be honest with you, if they're looking at 39 wins, they're probably still there fighting for the bottom of the play-in, but 39 wins is the range where you're like, maybe they just missed the cut. You know what I mean? And there's so many toss-ups in this schedule. You know what I mean? We talked about it this whole episode. So many times they play the same team within the same amount of time, not just twice, but multiple times sometimes, especially early in the season. The veteran leadership that they have on this team, experience from guys like Nas, from Royce, from Grayson, guys that have done this before on good regular season teams. Like, if they get off to a good start, the season has, I think, a pretty optimistic outlook on it. If they really struggle and consistently hover around under 3-4 games under 500, closing in towards the new year, that's when you got to start to worry a little bit. Because if they're not pushing over 500 by that point, I don't think they're going to get over 500 by the end of the season, because the beginning of the schedule truly is a good amount easier than the back half by a good margin, I think. But before we get out of here, Albert, you have any other thoughts on the schedule as a whole? Any games, anything just at all?
Not really anything new. Again, it's going to come down to availability. it's gonna come down to them not losing their motivation and their spirit, and this is something that has happened to Hornets teams in recent years. Of course, they have always struggled with injuries, but nevertheless, you could tell that probably not last season, obviously, but the 2 or 3 years before that, you could really make the case that they just kind of gave up on themselves, and they had some teams that were really lacking talent across those years, but nevertheless, they could have played better, certainly, at times, and oftentimes you were at Christmas. You could be sitting at Christmas dinner with your family if you're living in Charlotte, and the last thing you'd want to talk about is the Charlotte Hornets, because they were probably so far out of the play-in race that it wouldn't even be a fun hypothetical to talk about. It would be so unrealistic that you would get laughed at.
Well, you know, the defining factor in most every season for the Hornets is, well, I'm looking back at the schedule right now before we close it out. January 9th to January 19th. Okay, that's their 6-game West Coast road trip. They do one every season, and it's always around the turn of the new year. Like, it's always around that time. And you're mentioning Christmas dinner. Every single year, by the time we get to that West Coast road trip, the West Coast road trip really determines how the season goes most times. Like last year, I think they went 4-2, 3-3.
They did
on
pretty
the
well.
West Coast. Like that's why they finished so much better than people expected. If they're, sitting a couple games over 500 coming into January and they do well on this West Coast road trip, the trajectory I think is going up. But if they're a couple games under and hit January and really struggle, go 1-5, 2-4 on this trip, like I think it might only be downhill from there. The turn of the new year and how they've played up until then is really going to be a massive factor in how this season goes. So that's going to be it for today, guys. Thank you for joining us. A long episode, but we hope you enjoyed the talk about all 80 games. We didn't talk about. Let us know your record predictions below. Let us know what you think of ours. Just let us know what you think in general. You can always leave a question to be considered for a future mailbag. You can also find us on Spotify by searching up Blood City Breakdown. Make sure you leave us 5 stars over there. It's always appreciated. Like and subscribe on YouTube. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps us keep doing this 5 days a week for right now during the summer. With that said, I'm Owen. That's Albert. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see y'all tomorrow.
See ya.